The water was a greedy, freezing blackness, swallowing the light, the warmth, and the last vestiges of my hope. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Our first anniversary. A private cruise on a sapphire blue sea, under a blanket of diamond-bright stars. Julian had promised me paradise. He'd given me a nightmare instead. The storm had come from nowhere, a tantrum of nature that tossed our sleek yacht like a toy in a bathtub. One moment we were laughing, clinging to each other as the deck pitched. The next, a wall of water had slammed into us, the world tilting on its axis. The scream of tearing metal was the last coherent sound I heard before the icy shock of the sea stole my breath. Now I was fighting. Kicking against the paralyzing cold, my lungs burning, my silk dress a death shroud around my legs. My hand, numb and desperate, was clamped around Julian's wrist. His other hand was clamped around hers. Isabel. His personal assistant. The one who had to join us for this romantic getaway because, as Julian had said with that charming, dismissive smile of his, the Henderson deal is too sensitive, my love. I need her on hand. I'd swallowed the bitter pill as I always did, smothering my unease under a layer of trust I'd painstakingly built over 5 years. Through the stinging salt water and the chaotic spray I saw his face. Not looking at me but at her. Isabel's eyes were wide with terror, her porcelain skin ghostly in the sporadic flashes of lightning. She was gasping, flailing, a damsel in genuine heart-stopping distress. And Julian was making a calculation. I saw it in the hardening of his jaw, the shift in his grip. We were both clinging to a piece of floating debris too small for three. The life raft was gone, the emergency beacon a futile wish in the vast, angry ocean. Julian, I choked out the word, a waterlogged gasp. I can't, my leg. I twisted it during the fall, a hot, sharp pain that was now a dull, throbbing anchor pulling me down. He turned his head and for a fleeting second his eyes met mine. They weren't the eyes of the man who'd knelt in a garden of roses and promised me forever. They were the eyes of a stranger, cold and pragmatic, assessing our respective values. Only one can be saved here, he shouted over the roar of the wind and waves, his voice stripped of all emotion. It was a statement of fact, devoid of the horror that should have accompanied it. My heart stopped. What? He looked from me to Isabel, then back to me. His gaze dropped to my leg, then to Isabel's seemingly uninjured form. She can give me everything, Alara, he yelled, the words hitting me with more force than any wave. Connections. The future. You're just you. The sheer, brutal simplicity of it shattered my world more completely than the sinking yacht ever could. You're just you. 5 years of love, of shared dreams, of building a life reduced to that. A negligible variable in his grand equation of success. Before I could even process the betrayal, he was moving. He pried my frozen fingers from his wrist. The sensation was one of ultimate violation. It wasn't a slip. It was a deliberate, forceful unclenching. I'm saving her, he said, and it was a decree. He wrapped his arm around Isabel, who sobbed and buried her face in his neck, and he kicked away from the debris, away from me. He used the very piece of wreckage I was clinging to as a launch pad, pushing off and propelling them toward a larger floating section of the hull. I was alone. The shock of his abandonment was a colder chill than the Arctic water. I watched them go, my vision blurring, not from salt water but from a pain so profound it felt like my soul was being ripped in two. He didn't look back. Not once. He swam, a strong, determined stroke, toward what he perceived as his salvation, leaving me to drown in the dark. He can give me everything. The words echoed in the hollow chamber of my skull. Oh, the bitter, cosmic irony of it. If only he knew. If only he had waited just one more week. The letter from my father's lawyers, the one I'd locked in the safe aboard the yacht, was now at the bottom of the sea, along with the last shred of my old life. The letter that confirmed the final transfer of my inheritance. The one that made me Alara Vance, the sole heir and now the active owner of Vance Global, a conglomerate so vast it made Julian's ambitious tech startup look like a lemonade stand. He thought Isabel, with her old money family and their fading influence, was the key to his kingdom. He had no idea he'd just thrown away the key to the entire world. But the knowledge wasn't a comfort. It was a ghost, a taunt. What did wealth matter when you were about to die? What did power mean when you were alone in the crushing, indifferent dark? My strength was ebbing. The pain in my leg was a distant throb, overshadowed by the overwhelming urge to just stop fighting. To let the water take me. to let the cold numb the agony in my heart. I closed my eyes, ready to surrender to the abyss. But then, a spark ignited in the frozen depths of my soul. A tiny, defiant ember of fury. Oh, he didn't get to do this. He didn't get to decide my worth and then discard me like trash. He didn't get to live his perfect life with his everything while my body fed the fishes. With a raw, guttural scream that was torn from the very core of my being, I fought. I kicked my good leg, ignoring the fire in the other. I clawed at the water, my arms heavy as lead. I would not die here. I would not let his be the last face I saw, his words the last I heard. I would live. And I would make him regret the day he ever chose Isabel over me. It felt like an eternity. A lifetime of struggle against the relentless sea. My thoughts became fragmented, memories of my father, his stern face, his unwavering belief in my strength, flashing before me. I couldn't die. I had a company to run. A legacy to uphold. A revenge to exact. Just as the last of my strength was about to fail, a miracle. A light cutting through the rain and spray. A voice amplified by a megaphone. A thick, sturdy rope was thrown into the water near me. A rescue boat, a container ship that had altered its course upon picking up a faint, automated signal. A signal from a watch my father had given me, a panic button I'd activated in the first moments of the chaos. A piece of my old life, the one I'd hidden from Julian, had saved me. Strong hands hauled me from the water, wrapping me in rough, warm blankets. I was safe. But as I lay shivering on the deck, the salt of the ocean on my lips mingled with the salt of my tears, I knew one thing for certain. Elara Vance, the gentle, trusting woman who loved Julian, was dead. She had drowned in that cold, black water. The woman they were taking back to shore was someone else entirely. The world returned in fragments of sterile white and the persistent antiseptic smell of a hospital. A blur of concerned faces. Doctors, nurses, a stern-looking man in a suit who identified himself as Mr. Albright, my father's lawyer. My body felt like a foreign entity, bruised and broken, the sprained ankle a minor inconvenience compared to the fracture in my spirit. I gave them a name. Not my own. Laura Smith, I whispered, my voice raspy from swallowed seawater and unshed tears. It was close enough to the truth to be believable, far enough to keep the vultures at bay. The press would have a field day with this. Heiress presumed dead in yacht tragedy. Billionaire daughter drowns as boyfriend saves another. I couldn't face it. Not yet. Mr. Albright, a man who had known me since I was in pigtails, played along with a quiet, grim understanding. He shielded me, using his considerable influence to create a bubble of anonymity. He confirmed the worst, his voice low and steady. The Coast Guard had called off the active search. Julian and Isabel had been picked up by a fishing vessel after 36 hours at sea. They were alive. They were heroes in their own narrative, the sole survivors of a tragic accident. They thought I was dead. The thought was a strange, hollow ache. Julian believed he had killed me as surely as if he'd held a knife to my throat. And he had moved on. The news footage on the small TV in my private room showed them, pale and wrapped in blankets, being helped from a rescue helicopter. Julian's arm was protectively around Isabel's shoulders. He gave a brief, somber statement, his voice cracking with what the world mistook for grief. "We tried to save Elara," he said, his eyes downcast, the picture of a devastated lover. "The current was too strong. She just slipped away." I watched, my hands clenched so tightly the four-line protested. The lie was so smooth, so effortless. He had shed his guilt as easily as he'd shed me in the water. Isabel stood beside him, her face a mask of tragic beauty, playing her part to perfection. The media ate it up. Star-crossed lovers survived tragedy, the headlines screamed. Their story was one of endurance, of a love that survived against all odds. My story was a footnote. The girlfriend who didn't make it. The fury that had kept me alive in the water began to cool and harden in my chest, turning into something else. A cold, sharp and purposeful resolve. It was an anvil upon which I would forge my new self. When I was finally discharged, I didn't go home. The penthouse Julian and I shared was his domain, filled with curated memories that were now exposed as lies. I went to the one place that was truly, irrevocably mine. The Vance family estate, a sprawling, modern fortress perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. A different ocean from the one that had tried to claim me. This one was calm, azure, and obedient. It suited my new mood. Standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows, I looked out at the horizon. My reflection stared back, a gaunt, pale woman with shadows under her eyes and a grim set to her mouth. My long chestnut hair, once Julian's favorite feature, felt tainted. I walked into the bathroom, found a pair of shears, and without a moment's hesitation I began to cut. Chunks of wet, dark hair fell into the sink, a tangible shedding of the past. When I was done, it was a short, sharp, asymmetrical bob. It was severe. It was armor. Next I opened the wardrobe. My old clothes, flowing dresses, soft cashmere sweaters, the elegant, understated palette Julian had always preferred, were banished. In their place, Mr. Albright had arranged for a new wardrobe. Sleek, powerful, monochromatic. Sharp-shouldered blazers, tailored trousers, dresses that were weapons of silhouette and structure. I slipped into a black cowl-necked dress that clung to my newly angular frame. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. She was hard. She was angry. She was Alara Vance, CEO. My first official act was to step out of the shadows. A press conference was arranged. The world was about to learn that the poor drowned heiress was very much alive. The flashbulbs were a staccato burst of light as I walked onto the podium. I saw the shock ripple through the room. They were expecting a grieving, broken girl. They found a queen returned from the dead. I didn't smile. I didn't show emotion. My name is Alara Vance, I began, my voice clear and steady, amplified through the speakers. I am the majority shareholder and new CEO of Vance Global. Contrary to recent reports, I did not perish in the yacht incident. I was rescued after a considerable time adrift. I am alive, I am well, and I am now assuming full control of my father's legacy. The room erupted in questions. I held up a hand and silence fell. Power, I was learning, was a language everyone understood. I will not be taking questions about the incident at this time, I stated, my gaze sweeping over the crowd. My focus is on the future of Vance Global. But I let my eyes linger on the cameras for a moment, a cold, knowing look. It was a message shot directly into the living room of one Julian Croft. The reaction was as instantaneous as it was satisfying. My private number, which I had not yet changed, lit up like a Christmas tree. Dozens of missed calls. Pleading voicemails. Alara? My God, it's you. It's a miracle. Please, darling, call me. We need to talk. I've been out of my mind with grief. His voice was a pathetic, desperate whine. I deleted each message without listening to the end. He had chosen his everything. He could live with her. My second act was to delve into the company he coveted so deeply. Vance Global was a behemoth with tendrils in tech, media, real estate, and biotech. And as I pored over the financials and corporate strategies with Mr. Albright and my new hand-picked board, I found a delicious, perfect thread. Julian's precious startup, Ethel, was on the verge of a monumental breakthrough. He had spent years developing a revolutionary data streaming algorithm. His entire future, the one he had traded my life for, was hinged on its success. And his single largest potential investor, the one he was counting on to launch Ethel into the stratosphere, was a silent partner who had recently increased their stake to a controlling interest. That silent partner was a shell corporation which was owned by another holding company which was ultimately owned by a trust. My trust. A slow, cold smile spread across my face for the first time since the accident. He was begging for my attention on the phone, not knowing he was already kneeling at my feet, his financial fate clutched in my hand. He had built his kingdom on sand and I owned the tide. I instructed Mr. Albright to have the board of the Shell Corporation issue a notice. Ethel was being audited. All funding was frozen pending review. The game had begun. And he didn't even know he was a player. The charity gala for the Metropolitan Art Foundation was the event of the season. A sea of glittering jewels, black ties, and the kind of effortless wealth that took generations to cultivate. It was also the perfect hunting ground. I knew he would be here. Julian always attended, a charming predator looking for investors, his smile a carefully calibrated weapon. This year he would be the prey. I made my entrance late, a calculated move to ensure all eyes were on me. I wore a gown of liquid mercury, a stark metallic silver that seemed to drink the light and spit it back out as a challenge. It was backless, severe, and utterly unforgettable. My short, dark hair was slicked back, my makeup minimal except for a slash of crimson on my lips. I was a blade honed and ready. The ripple of conversation died as I walked through the doors on the arm of Alexander Thorne. Alex was a rival tech magnate, brilliant, ruthless, and crucially someone who had never liked Julian. When I'd outlined my plan, he'd merely raised an eyebrow and said, "It will be my pleasure." Having him by my side was a message in itself. I felt Julian's gaze before I saw him. A hot, shocked intensity from across the room. I allowed my eyes to sweep over the crowd, meeting his for a fraction of a second. I saw the color drain from his face. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. In a way he had. He was standing with Isabel, who was clinging to his arm, draped in pale pink silk. She looked beautiful, fragile. She also looked terrified. Our eyes met, and a flicker of pure, undiluted guilt crossed her features before she quickly looked away. Good. He should be scared. I turned my back on them and immersed myself in the crowd. I was the sensation of the night. The resurrected heiress, the mysterious Nucio. People were fascinated, drawn to the power and the story. I was gracious, cool, and utterly in control. I discussed merger potentials with a media tycoon, debated sustainable architecture with a renowned designer, all while being acutely aware of Julian's desperate, circling presence. He was trying to get to me, but I was always just out of reach, surrounded by a protective phalanx of the city's most influential people. Finally, during a string quartet's performance, he cornered me near a towering floral arrangement. "Elara," he breathed, his voice strained. He looked older. The stress of the frozen funding was already etching lines on his handsome face. "My God. It is you." I turned, allowing a polite, distant smile to touch my lips. "Julian. How nice to see you." The blandness of my tone threw him. He'd expected hysterics, accusations, tears. He'd prepared for a scene. He was not prepared for this glacial calm. "Nice?" he repeated, a hysterical edge to his whisper. "Elara, I thought you were dead. We all did. Where have you been? Why didn't you contact me?" "Contact you?" I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "Why would I do that? Our business relationship was concluded." His jaw dropped. "Business relationship? Is that what you call 5 years? Our life together." "Our life together," I said, my voice dropping to a low, carrying murmur, "ended when you made a business decision in the water, Julian. You chose your asset. I merely respected your choice." He flinched as if I'd struck him. The truth, stated so calmly in this opulent setting, was more devastating than any scream. "It wasn't like that," he pleaded, stepping closer. I caught a whiff of his cologne, the same one I used to love. Now it smelled of deceit. "You have to believe me. It was the panic, the storm. I wasn't thinking clearly. I would never have left you if I'd had a choice." "You had a choice," I said, my eyes locking with his. I let the mask slip for just a second, allowing him to see the frozen hell that his betrayal had created. "You said, and I believe I recall your words perfectly, only one can be saved. He can give me everything. You're just you." The blood left his face completely. He hadn't known I'd hurt him. He thought his final betrayal had been swallowed by the storm. I didn't mean it," he stammered, his composure cracking. "It was the adrenaline talking." "Was it?" I asked softly. "Or was it the first moment of stark, unfiltered truth?" I glanced over at Isabel, who was watching us with a pale, anxious face. "How is your everything, Julian? Is she living up to her promise?" His eyes widened as the implication sank in. I knew exactly why he'd chosen her. Just then, Alex materialized at my side, a glass of champagne in his hand. "Everything all right, Elara?" he asked, his voice a low, protective rumble. "Perfectly," I said, taking the glass. "Mr. Croft was just leaving." Julian looked from me to Alex, and a new, sickening understanding dawned in his eyes. The alliance he saw was a threat he couldn't comprehend. "Elara, please," he begged, his voice desperate. "We need to talk. Privately. There's so much to explain." "I think you've explained enough," I said, my tone final. I turned to Alex. "Shall we? I believe the auction is about to begin." I walked away, leaving Julian standing alone, shattered amidst the glamour. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel his world crumbling behind me. The phantom had appeared at his feast, and the haunting had only just begun. The public humiliation was complete. Now it was time to dismantle his private life, piece by piece. Revenge, I was discovering, was not a single explosive event. It was a slow, meticulous process, like a master watchmaker taking apart a complex timepiece. Each tiny gear removed, each spring carefully uncoiled, until the whole mechanism simply stopped. The public confrontation at the gala had been the first loud tick. Now the silent, internal workings of his demise began in earnest. Ethel was his life's work, his pride, the very reason he had deemed me expendable. It was only fitting that it become the instrument of his destruction. Settled into the stark, minimalist splendor of my father's old office on the top floor of the Vance Global Tower, I began my work. With Mr. Albright and a small, fiercely loyal team of analysts I'd vetted myself, we tore into Ethel's financials. Julian was a brilliant coder but a reckless businessman. In his desperate push for growth, he'd taken shortcuts. There were blurred lines between personal and company expenses, questionable contracts with shell companies, and a series of loans from institutions with less than savory reputations. He was over-leveraged and skating on very thin ice. My frozen funding was the first crack. Now I applied pressure. A carefully worded, anonymous tip was sent to a financial journalist known for her tenacity. The resulting article didn't accuse Julian of anything outright, but it raised serious questions about Ethel's financial health and its opaque investor structure. The damage was immediate. The vultures, his other investors, began to circle. Phone calls he couldn't answer. Emails demanding reassurance he couldn't give. I watched it all from my command center. My team had set up a live feed of Ethel's social media sentiment. The graph, once a healthy green, was now a sickly, plummeting red. I allowed myself a moment of cold satisfaction. This was the everything he had chosen. A house of cards. My personal phone, the one he kept calling, remained silent. But he found other ways to try and reach me. Flowers arrived at the estate. Enormous, apologetic bouquets of my favorite Casablanca lilies. I had my security chief, a stoic Exius man named Evans, incinerate them. Pleading letters, handwritten on his heavy, expensive stationery, were returned unopened. He even tried to reach me through mutual friends, who called me with thinly veiled lectures about forgiveness and giving a man a second chance. I politely ended those friendships. My world was being purged of anything that reminded me of my former weakness. The most satisfying move was yet to come. I discovered that the key to Ethel's algorithm, the secret sauce, was actually built upon an open-source framework that had very specific licensing agreements. Agreements Julian had violated. It was a technicality, a tiny flaw in the foundation of his empire. But tiny flaws, when placed under immense pressure, can cause catastrophic failure. I instructed my legal team, a pack of wolves in Armani suits, to file a lawsuit on behalf of our shell corporation. Not for damages, not yet. That would come later. This was an injunction to halt all development and commercial use of the Ethel algorithm, citing intellectual property theft. It was a nuclear option. The day the papers were served, my intercom buzzed. Evans's voice, devoid of all emotion, came through. "Ms. Vance, a Mr. Julian Croft is at the main gate. He is insistent." A slow smile touched my lips. The begging was about to begin in earnest. But he wasn't at my door yet. Not truly. "Have security remove him from the property," I instructed calmly. "If he refuses to leave, inform him the police will be involved." I walked to the window, looking down from my dizzying height. I couldn't see the gate from here, but I could imagine it. Julian, disheveled and desperate, being physically escorted away from the fortress walls. The first true taste of his powerlessness. His world was collapsing, and he knew with a dawning, terrifying certainty that it wasn't bad luck. It was design. He was starting to connect the dots. The mysterious, powerful investor freezing his funds. The timely press leak. The devastating lawsuit. And my resurrection, not as the gentle Alara he could manipulate, but as Alara Vance, a force of nature he had foolishly provoked. That night I sat in the silence of my study, a single lamp casting a pool of light on my father's old oak desk. I opened a locked drawer and took out the only personal item I'd saved from the old penthouse. A photograph. It was of us from a year ago on a beach at sunset. Julian was laughing, his arms wrapped around me, his chin resting on my head. I looked so happy, so trusting, so blind. I used to look at that photo and feel a pang of loss, a devastating grief for the love I thought was real. Now I felt nothing but a cold, clean clarity. The woman in that picture was gone. She was a necessary casualty. I picked up a heavy silver letter opener, its point needle sharp. I held the photograph over the wastebasket and slowly, deliberately, dragged the point down the middle, slicing through our smiling faces. I let the two halves flutter down into the bin. The past was trash. The future was mine to shape. The noose was tight around his neck. And soon, very soon, he would understand who was holding the rope. A week after the lawsuit was filed, the facade of Julian's perfect new life began to crack in a very public and for me deeply satisfying way. Isabel's family, the Wainwrights, were old money aristocracy. They valued reputation above all else, and their daughter's name being splashed across the business section, linked to a company now accused of fraud and intellectual property theft, was their worst nightmare. A juicy tidbit, leaked from a very reliable source inside their inner circle, hit the society blogs. It detailed a massive, screaming argument between Julian and Isabel's father at the family's country club. The elder Wainwright had reportedly given Julian an ultimatum: fix the mess or lose Isabel. The article was peppered with delicious phrases like gold digger, sinking ship, and social suicide. I read it over my morning coffee, the bitter brew a perfect accompaniment to the news. So his everything was proving to be rather conditional. It seemed the Wainwrights' support was as deep as a puddle in a drought. The pressure was taking its toll on him visibly. Paparazzi shots, which my security team dutifully compiled for me, showed a haggard, unshaven Julian, his eyes shadowed with panic. The charming, confident entrepreneur was gone, replaced by a man staring into the abyss. His investors were pulling out one by one. His staff was jumping ship. Ethel was a ghost town. It was then that he truly broke. He didn't just come to the gate this time. He must have waited for hours watching, because he managed to slip past the first perimeter when a delivery van was admitted. Evans's voice was tight over the intercom. "Miss Vance, he's on the grounds. He's run to the main entrance. He's on his knees." A cold thrill, entirely devoid of pity, shot through me. On his knees. Just as I'd promised myself in the water. "Let him in, Evans," I said, my voice calm. "Escort him to the library. I'll be down in 10 minutes. I took my time. I finished my coffee. I checked my emails. I wanted him to stew. I wanted him to feel the weight of the space, the imposing silence of the house, the sheer, unassailable power it represented. When I finally walked down the grand staircase, every step was measured, the click of my heels on the marble a deliberate percussion announcing my arrival. I found him in the library, a 2-story room lined with thousands of leather-bound books my father had collected but never read. Julian was standing now, but he looked broken. His clothes were rumpled, his hair a mess. He turned as I entered, and the raw, desperate hope in his eyes was almost pathetic. "Elara," he breathed, taking a step toward me. Evans, a silent, mountainous presence by the door, shifted slightly. Julian froze. I didn't offer him a seat. I stood near the cold fireplace, crossing my arms. "You have 5 minutes, Julian. I have a board meeting." The formality seemed to crush him further. "A board meeting," he repeated, a hollow laugh escaping him. "Of course. Vance Global. It was you all along, wasn't it? The investor. The one who froze the funds. The lawsuit." I said nothing. I just watched him, my face an impassive mask. "Why?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why are you doing this? Is it because of the water? Because I made a mistake? My God, Elara, I have paid for that mistake every single day since. I thought I lost you. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" The audacity of his self-pity was breathtaking. "You didn't lose me, Julian," I corrected him, my voice like ice. "You threw me away. You assessed our relative value and found me wanting. I'm merely following your example." "It wasn't like that," he cried, his composure shattering. He fell to his knees again, right there on the priceless Persian rug. "It was a moment of insanity. I love you. I have always loved you. Isabel, she means nothing. It was a business arrangement, a stupid, horrible mistake." The echoes of his words in the water, "She can give me everything," hung in the air between us. The irony was so thick you could taste it. "You love me," I repeated, letting the words drip with skepticism. "You have a strange way of showing it. Leaving me to drown seems a rather definitive end to a love story." I was wrong, he sobbed, actual tears streaming down his face. It was a grotesque spectacle. I see that now. I see everything now. Your strength, your intelligence. You were always the one, Alara. You are my everything. Please. I'm begging you. He crawled forward a few inches, his hands clasped as if in prayer. Call off the lawyers. Release the funds. You have the power to save me. You can have it all, the company, me, everything. I'll leave Isabel today. We can go back to how we were. I looked down at him, this man I had once thought hung the moon. This man who had been my sun and my stars. Now he was a sniveling worm, groveling at my feet for a lifeline he didn't deserve. There was no anger left in me. No hatred. Just a vast, empty expanse of contempt. How we were. I said softly. You mean me playing the devoted girlfriend, blind to your calculations, while you built your empire on the back of my family's connections and waited for a better opportunity to present itself? Oh, Julian. I don't think I want to go back to that. His face crumpled. What do you want from me? What can I do? This isn't about what you can do, I said, taking a step closer, looking down at him from my full height. This is about what I have already done. This is about consequences. You made a choice. This is the result. I turned to leave. Alara, wait, he screamed, his voice ragged. Please. I'll do anything. I'll sign over Ethel to you. Just don't ruin me. I paused at the door, glancing back at him over my shoulder. He was on his knees, broken, defeated. Exactly where he belonged. You're already ruined, Julian, I said, my tone final. I'm just the one turning out the lights. I nodded to Evans, who moved to escort the sobbing man from my home. As the library doors closed, I heard one last desperate wail. It was the sound of a man losing everything. And for the first time since the cold water had claimed me, I felt a sense of peace. The revenge was not complete, but the victory was. He knew. He finally, truly knew who I was and the magnitude of the mistake he had made. The begging was over. Now it was time for the burial. With Julian's spirit broken, the dismantling of his professional life became a straightforward, administrative affair. It was almost boring. His groveling plea had been the dramatic climax. What followed was a quiet, legal denouement. The injunction against Ethel held. With development frozen and the company toxic to investors, it was bleeding the last of its capital at an alarming rate. Julian's other backers, seeing the writing on the wall, initiated a fire sale. They wanted to recoup whatever pennies on the dollar they could. My shell corporation, through a series of anonymous bids, bought Ethel's core assets. The patents, the code, the brand name, for a sum so low it was an insult. The rest, the office lease, the furniture, the employment contracts, were liquidated to pay off creditors. Julian was left with nothing but personal debt and a reputation in tatters. The day the sale was finalized, I took a private elevator down to a secure sub-basement of the Vance Global Tower. This was the incubation lab, a state-of-the-art research and development facility known only to a handful of top executives. Here, a team of my brightest engineers who had been working in parallel on a similar data streaming project was waiting. On a large monitor in the center of the sterile, white room, lines of code scrolled past. It was the Ethel algorithm, now clean, optimized, and stripped of its legal entanglements. Run the final diagnostic, I instructed. The lead engineer, a young woman named Dr. Eris, typed a command. A progress bar filled on the screen. Integration is complete, Ms. Vance. The architecture is stable. It's ready. Designate it Project Phoenix, I said. And prepare a press release for next week. Vance Global is entering the data streaming market. A faint smile touched Dr. Eris's lips. Apt name. It was. From the ashes of his betrayal, I had built something newer, stronger, and entirely mine. I had not just destroyed his dream, I had absorbed it, making it a mere footnote in the Vance Global legacy. His life's work was now my property. As I rode the elevator back up to my office, I felt no triumphant thrill, only a quiet sense of closure. The business with Julian was over. The account was settled. But life, I was learning, has a strange way of interrupting even the most carefully laid plans. Later that afternoon, I had a meeting with Alexander Thorne. Our alliance at the gala had been a strategic move, but in the weeks since, we had discovered a genuine synergy. He was sharp, ambitious, and he didn't treat me like a porcelain doll or a vengeful harpy. He saw me as an equal. appear. We were in my office discussing a potential joint venture in sustainable AI, when a sharp stabbing pain shot through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over my desk, a cold sweat instantly beading on my forehead. Elara. Alex was at my side in an instant, his voice laced with genuine concern. What is it? What's wrong? I don't know, I managed to grit out. The pain was intense, nauseating. It's probably just stress. His hand was on my shoulder, firm and steady. This isn't stress. Evans, he called out, his voice brooking no argument. Call Dr. Evans. No. And get the car. I wanted to protest, to insist I was fine, but another wave of pain stole my breath. The world swam before my eyes. The last thing I was aware of was Alex scooping me up into his arms as if I weighed nothing, his face a mask of fierce determination as he carried me out of the office. I woke up in a private hospital room, the lights dim. The sterile smell was familiar, triggering a flash of panic from the aftermath of the shipwreck. I tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pressed me back. Easy there, a calm female voice said. It was the doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes. You gave us a bit of a scare. What happened? My voice was hoarse. Acute appendicitis, the doctor said. We had to operate. It was laparoscopic, so the recovery will be quick, but it was touch and go for a minute. You're very lucky your friend got you here so fast. My friend. Alex. As if on cue, the door opened and he walked in. He still wore his suit jacket, but his tie was loose and he looked tired. In his hand was a paper cup of water. You're awake, he said, his shoulders slumping in visible relief. He handed me the cup. Here. Small sips. I drank, the water cooling my parched throat. You carried me out. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. You were hardly in a state to walk. He pulled a chair up to the bedside. The doctor says you'll be fine. You just need to rest. I looked at him, really looked at him. This powerful, formidable man had dropped everything to take care of me. He hadn't called my assistants or my security. He had taken charge himself. There was no calculation in his eyes, no hidden agenda. Just concern. Why are you here, Alex? Asked, my voice soft. He held my gaze, his own steady and direct. Because you needed someone, he said simply. And because I wanted to be. In that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of my past and the cold reality of my revenge, something in the frozen fortress around my heart began to thaw. Just a little. Just a crack. Julian had left me to drown. Alex had carried me to safety. It was a contrast so stark, so profound that it left me breathless. The pursuit of revenge had given me a purpose, a reason to get out of bed. But it was a cold, empty fuel. As I lay there, vulnerable and weak, I realized I was tired of being cold. The war with Julian was over. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to lay down my arms. Recovery was a quiet, introspective time. I was confined to the estate under strict orders to rest. The world of Vance Global, so all-consuming just days before, was forced to wait. The silence was unnerving at first. Without the hum of vengeance to fill the space, old ghosts tried to whisper. The memory of the cold water, the sound of Julian's final words, the image of his face as he kicked away. But a new memory was layered over them now. Alex's face, etched with worry, his arms holding me with a strength that was about protection, not possession. He visited every day. Not out of obligation it seemed, but because he genuinely wanted to. He never brought flowers. Instead he brought things that mattered. A first-edition copy of a sci-fi novel my father had loved, having somehow learned about it from an old interview. A proposal for the sustainable AI venture, meticulously detailed because he knew I'd be bored. Once he just brought takeout from a tiny, incredible Thai place he insisted I try, and we ate in the sunroom talking about everything and nothing. It was during one of these visits, a week after my surgery, that the outside world finally intruded in the form of Evans. Ms. Vance, he said, his voice a low rumble. A Ms. Isabel Wainwright is at the gate. She wishes to speak with you. She says it's important. I stiffened. Isabel. The everything. I hadn't given her a single thought since the Society blog leak. I expected to feel a surge of anger, but I felt only a distant curiosity. What could she possibly want? Alex, who was sitting across from me reviewing a contract, looked up. Do you want me to leave? I shook my head. No. Stay. His presence was a grounding force. Evans let her in. Bring her to the drawing room. Isabel looked like a faded photograph of her former self. The pink silk and perfect makeup were gone. She wore simple, expensive jeans and a sweater, her face free of makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked young and scared. "Ilara," she said, her voice trembling as she stood in the center of the grand room. Her eyes flickered to Alex, who remained seated in an armchair, a silent, observant sentinel before returning to me. "Thank you for seeing me." "I'm listening," I said, not offering her a seat. She wrung her hands. "I've left Julian." I said nothing. I just waited. "The things he said after he came here," she continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "The way he talked about you, it was like an obsession. He wasn't sad he lost you, he was furious he lost what you represented. The power. He thought if he could just get you back he could control Vance Global. It was all he talked about." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was still chilling. And then, when the company fell apart, he became someone else. Angry. Bitter. He blamed everyone, you, his investors, me, especially me. Her eyes filled with tears. He said I was a useless ornament. That my family was a dead end. That choosing me was the biggest mistake of his life. The poetic justice was so perfect it was almost cliché. He had gotten exactly what he asked for and it had destroyed him. "I'm so sorry, Ilara," Isabel whispered, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "For everything. I knew he was with you and I was flattered by his attention. Thought he was so ambitious, so brilliant. I didn't know he was a monster. And I didn't know what he did to you in the water. Not until later. He lied to me too. He told me you were already gone when we swam away." I studied her. Her remorse seemed genuine. She was a pawn in his game just as I had been, though a more willing one. She had been seduced by the illusion of him just as I had. The main difference was that her seduction came with a luxury price tag, while mine had cost me my trust, my love, and nearly my life. "Your apology is noted," I said, my voice even. "But it doesn't change what happened." "I know," she said, wiping her face. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I needed you to know that I see it now. I see him for what he is. And I'm sorry for the part one played." She took a deep, shaky breath. "I'm moving back to London with my family. I just wanted to say that before I go." She turned and left without another word, Evans silently seeing her out. The room was quiet after she left. I stood, walking to the window, feeling Alex's gaze on my back. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. I thought about it. The last person from that old life had come and gone, bearing confirmation of everything I already knew. It didn't bring anger. It didn't bring satisfaction. It felt over. I said, and I realized it was the truth. The ghost of Julian Croft had finally been laid to rest. I turned to face Alex. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. "You know," I said, "for the longest time I thought love was a transaction. My father loved me, but it was always conditional on me being strong, being a worthy heir. Julian, well, his love was the ultimate transaction. I thought that was all there was." Alex stood and walked over to me. "And now, I said, looking up at him, my voice soft, "I'm starting to think I was wrong. He didn't touch me. He didn't make a grand declaration. He just looked at me, his eyes clear and honest. Not all foundations are built on sand, Ilara." In that moment, surrounded by the ashes of my past, I allowed myself to believe him. I allowed myself to look at this man, not as a tool or an ally, but as a possibility. A second chance at something I hadn't dared believe in anymore. The door to my heart, locked and bolted for so long, creaked open, letting in a sliver of light. The final piece of my revenge was not an act of destruction, but one of creation. With Project Phoenix ready for launch and the joint venture with Alexander's company, Thorn Industries, formally announced, we hosted a product unveiling. It was more than a launch. It was a coronation. The venue was packed, the air buzzing with anticipation. I stood backstage watching the crowd on a monitor. I saw the familiar faces of the industry elite, the journalists, the people who had witnessed my humiliation and my resurrection. And then I saw him. Julian. He was standing at the very back, near the exit, shrouded in shadow. He was thinner, his suit looked cheap, and the aura of charming confidence was utterly gone. He was just a man, broken and bitter, watching the world move on without him. He had come to see the corpse of his dream, resurrected under my banner. A strange calm settled over me. There was no hatred, no lingering anger. He was simply irrelevant. It was time. I walked onto the stage to a thunderous applause. The lights were bright, the giant screen behind me displaying the sleek Phoenix logo. I was no longer the ghost at the feast. I was the queen claiming her throne. "My name is Alara Vance," I began, my voice clear and confident, echoing through the sound system. "And today Vance Global is not just launching a product. We are launching a new paradigm." For the next 20 minutes, I presented Project Phoenix. I spoke about its capabilities, its potential to revolutionize data connectivity, its ethical framework. I was sharp, articulate, and utterly in command. The audience was captivated. This was the woman I was always meant to be, freed from the cage of a man's limited imagination. As I concluded, the screen lit up with a live, global demonstration. It was flawless. The applause was deafening. And then, as I was about to leave the stage, my eyes found his again in the crowd. I held his gaze for a single, protracted moment. I didn't smile in triumph. I didn't glare in contempt. I simply looked at him, my expression one of utter, final indifference. Then I turned away. That look, I knew, would haunt him more than any curse or act of vengeance ever could. It was the confirmation that he no longer existed in my world. The event was a monumental success. Later, at the exclusive afterparty held in the Vance Global Atrium, I was surrounded by well-wishers and partners. I played the part of the gracious host, but my attention was elsewhere. I found Alex standing by a floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the glittering city skyline. I came to stand beside him, the noise of the party fading into a distant hum. "You were magnificent up there," he said without turning. "It felt right," I admitted. He finally looked at me, his eyes reflecting the city lights. "It was." He paused, then said, "I saw Croft was here." "I know," I said. "He came to see his legacy." "His legacy is a footnote in yours," Alex stated. It wasn't flattery, it was a fact. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city pulse with life below. "Alara," he said, his voice softer now. "Where do we go from here?" It was the question I had been asking myself. The war was over. The victory was mine. What came next? I thought of the cold, dark water, and the fiery determination to survive that it had forged in me. I thought of the long, lonely months of planning my revenge. And I thought of the recent weeks. Of kindness, of partnership, of quiet conversations and a hand offered in genuine support. I turned to face him fully. "I spent so long building walls, Alex. Fortifying myself. I thought being strong meant being alone. Means being hard. And now?" he asked, echoing my question from the hospital. "Now," I said, a genuine, slow smile finally touching my lips. "I think I'd like to try building a bridge instead." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of my short hair from my cheek. The touch was electric, but it was also safe. It was a question, not a demand. "Where would you like it to lead?" he whispered. "Somewhere new," I said, leaning into his touch, my heart feeling lighter than it had in years. "Somewhere with a better view." He smiled, a real warm smile that reached his eyes. "I know just the place." Later, as the party wound down, I walked through the quiet halls of my home. I went to my father's old study and unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a single, sealed envelope. It was the last letter he'd written me before he died, given to me by Mr. Albright with the instruction, "For when you truly need it." I broke the seal and unfolded the heavy paper. My father's bold, slashing script filled the page. "My dearest Alara, if you are reading this, it means you have faced the world without me. I have every confidence that you have not only faced it but conquered it. I was not always a demonstrative man, and for that I am sorry. I loved you with a fierceness that terrified me. I pushed you to be strong because the world is cruel to those who are soft, and I could not bear the thought of it breaking you. Remember this. True power is not in wealth, nor in the domination of others. It is in the choice to be kind when you have every reason to be cruel. It is in the courage to love again after you have been deeply wounded. Do not let my lessons of strength harden your heart. The ultimate strength is in remaining open, in trusting again, in building rather than destroying. You are and always have been my greatest success. Be happy, my daughter. That is the only legacy that truly matters. With all my love, Father. Tears, the first real healing tears I had shed since the shipwreck, filled my eyes and spilled down my cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness but of release. Of understanding. He had known. He had known the path I would have to walk, and he had given me the final, most important lesson of all. I had gotten my revenge. It was cold, precise, and complete. But as I sat there holding my father's letter, I knew it had only been the first step. The real journey, the one toward a life that was not defined by that single act of betrayal, was just beginning. I had been saved from the water. I had saved myself from the past. And now, with the ghost of Julian finally laid to rest and the possibility of a new love dawning, I was ready to save myself for the future. He had left me drowning, but I had learned to swim. And now I was finally ready to come ashore. The end.